Get started in just a moment since I'm doing the first part of the service. And Chazan, since I think you're host now, if you want to mute folks, I'll unmute myself when you do that.
Okay.
And we're going to just begin this Shabbat Haggadah, this great Shabbat. We're in this really interesting in-between time as Pesach will be coming this evening. We're in the Shabbat right before. Some of us are already chametz free, getting ready to taste that first bit of matzah and beginning the journey out of Egypt. And the kavanah that I want to offer you this morning for these introductory prayers of Pesukei Zimra, these prayers of preparation, is that we're all girding ourselves for the journey to become more free. And hopefully this journey is both an inner journey, it's also a journey that as a world, we have been journeying through the COVID, the narrow places of COVID, now beginning to look at the possibility of moving out of some of that tightness and fear and being confined to a greater freedom that we hope to have as a community, as a nation, as a world. We begin on page 61 of our Siddur. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta b'nishmati v'chemla, rabba emunatecha, rabba emunatecha, rabba emunatecha. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkeno techa Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkeno techa Yisrael. We turn ahead to page 63. We thank God for the gift of the soul that God has implanted within us. Elohai neshama shenatata b'teho rahim. Elohai neshama shenatata b'teho rahim. Elohai neshama shenatata b'teho rahim. Those of you who are able to rise, we begin with the morning brachot, the birchot hashachar, these blessings that give us opportunities to think about all of the different ways we have to be grateful to God for the gifts of our lives. Find one of them that speaks to you as we prepare for the coming of Pesach. I'll start with the first one and then give some time for quiet reflection before we conclude at the bottom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasechvi bina lavchin ben yom uben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Hanoten li'ayef koach. I invite you to be seated as we turn now to page 72 and continue with the Psalm for Shabbat, Psalm 92. at the top of the page. I'll try to get my camera just. Mizmor shir leyom ha-Shabbat, tov lehodot lahadonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Mizmor shir leyom ha-Shabbat, tov lehodot lahadonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. What a gift it is to be able to express gratitude to you, O God. There is no greater gift than the gift of gratitude. Tzadikatamar yifrach ke'erez ba'levanon yizgeshetuvim be'vet Adonai be'chatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenun v'seva Deshenim vera'ananim yehu lehagi Yashar Adonai Suhuri Belavlatavo. Our ancestors knew during their years of being slaves in Egypt that God was in hiding for them. And God ultimately reveals God's presence to them when they are able to call out from their pain and their oppression. And that ability to acknowledge their hurt and their vulnerability, that initiates God's response. So as we turn ahead to page 81 and chant Psalm 30, those words of Shema Adonai, we ask you to hear us, God. Those first words are the words of redemption, the words of acknowledgement that life is not always as we would wish it to be, but with God's strength and God's help, we can endure. Shema Adonai v'chaneni Adonai hayeh ozer li. Shema Adonai v'chaneni Adonai hayeh ozer li. Shema Adonai v'chaneni Adonai hayeh ozer li. Hafachta b'smili machali pitachta saki v'tazreni simcha. Man yizmecha chavav lo yidam Adonai lo halei olam odecha. I want to invite those in the process of mourning or observing a yahrzeit to unmute and to join with me Kadisha Tome, page 82. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. V'yalma divrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevorach v'olam amen. Yitbarach v'yitzvach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yitalev v'yithalal Shemei b'kudusha b'rechu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush l'chata v'nechemata. Damiran v'yama.
Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabbah v'yishmaya. V'chaim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav u'yaseh shalom Aleinu v'yam kol Yisrael.
Amen.
We're able to rise. We thank God for the gift of this world that God creates with speech, page 83. Baruch she'amar ve'ayah ha'olam. Baruch hu. Baruch oseh v'reshit. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch gozer u'mekayem. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem al habriot. Baruch mishalem sachar tov l'reihav. Baruch chai la'ad. V'kayam lahanetzach. Baruch podeh umatzil. Baruch shema baruch. Yachid Cheholamim Melech Mishubach Pradet Shemo Hagadol. Baruch Adonai Melech Mehulal Vatishbachol. I invite you to be seated. We're going to just listen to this melody that I hope is so familiar to folks at this point. We're going to sing it as a nigun, and I'm going to invite people to just fill the nigun with chesed, with whatever chesed you are aware of in your life. This is on page 92 if you want the words. Yay, da da da, yam da 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 da, yam da 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 da, yam da da da, yay da da da, yay da da da. Here's a little prayer that I want to offer you, God. Want to be able to see the world. Let me see the world with eyes of amazement. That's the way I want to see this world. If I look around and am not blown away, something may be wrong with the way I'm seeing this world. I can't believe how amazing this life is. Ki le'olam chasom. What miracles have you noticed since you awoke this morning? Did you notice just a few? When I look outside and I see the sun is shining on this Erev Pesach day, I'm blown away by the amazingness of this earth. How is it possible that it can support so much life? If I could see the world always with these lenses, I couldn't stop thanking you. If you look inside your heart, I know you can see the world through the eyes of amazement. Living in this way will make us feel such gratitude, and we can be humble for the gifts of our lives, which doesn't mean that sometimes life is gonna get real hard. Doesn't mean we see things always with rose-colored glasses, but even in our pain, if we know it can be hopefully gotten through, we can still give our praise to you. So find your praise, find it in your heart and sing, Ki le'olam chasto. You have noticed something, I'm sure that yes you have. Ki le'olam chasto. Maybe you're going to be with some family that you haven't been able to be together with in quite a while for Pesach. Ki le'olam chasto. Maybe you're going to Zoom with your family in Israel and some in Vancouver as well. Ki le'olam chasto. Or maybe you just got through something that was tough from a medical point of view. Ki le'olam chasto. Find those miracles and see the world that way. And then you'll be singing Ki le'olam chasto. All of Jewish life could be summed up in 3 words. Ki le'olam chasto. So if you can find your chesed, you will feel that way. Ki le'olam chasto. Yandai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yandai dai 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 dai. Find your chesed. Ki le'olam chasto. So I want to share a story. One of my favorite writers. You've heard me speak of her many times before, especially if you come on Friday nights for services pre-pandemic. It's a story. It's a Pesach story from Rabbi. She's my rabbi. She's not a rabbi. Rachel Naomi Rabin. I wanted to share a story of Rachel Naomi Rabin, who writes about that she remembers when she was a young child, she was really bored by how long the Passover Seder that would go on in her grandparents' house was. And her grandfather, who was a very religious Hasidic Jew, she remembers saying to her grandfather, "I hate Passover and I hate that stupid story." And so her grandfather said to her, "Neshumala, let me tell you the meaning of the Passover story. It goes something like this. Thousands and thousands of years ago, the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt. Like slaves everywhere, they suffered. They suffered greatly, but they had a dream of freedom. Their leader, Moses, spoke to God about this dream and the terrible suffering. And God told Moses to go to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and to tell him to let the Jewish people go. But not surprisingly, Pharaoh refused. So God sent a plague, and then another plague, and another. But Pharaoh had hardened his heart both to the suffering of the Jewish people and to the Egyptian people even. He made other promises to Moses, but he always went back on them. Finally, God sent the angel of death to take the firstborn of every Egyptian family. And that was too much even for the hard heart of Pharaoh. And so he finally told Moses that the Jews were free to go. Remen remembers asking her grandfather, "Is that the end of the story, Grandpa?" "No," he answered gently. "Actually, it's only the beginning." "So what happened next?" she asked. "Well," he continued, "Moses brought the news of their freedom to the rest of the people." "And then were they happy, Grandpa?" "No, Neshama, they weren't. They told Moses they didn't want to go. They asked a lot of questions. Where are we going? Who's going to feed us? Where are we going to sleep?" Moses was really upset. How could he tell God that after all that God had done, that to make this freedom possible, that the people didn't want to go? "But they were suffering, Grandpa. Why didn't they want to go?" she remembers asking. And her grandfather suddenly looked very sad. "They knew how to suffer," he explained. "That they had done for a long time, and they were used to it. But they didn't know how to be free." When Moses went back to God to tell God what had happened, God wasn't surprised. God said to Moses, "Tell the people that I myself will take them out of Egypt to the promised land." "Now," her grandfather said to her, "this is a very rare thing. Usually God sends others to carry out God's will, like an angel or a messenger. But this, God would do God's self." Moses told this to the people, and finally they agreed to leave their homes in Egypt and start out across the desert. There was no food there. There was no water. And they wandered for 40 years. Remen remembers being shocked. "But what about the promised land, Grandpa? Wasn't it true?" "Oh, yes, Neshama, it was true. But here's the real story. The choice people have to make is never between slavery and freedom. The choice that all of us have to make is the choice between slavery and the unknown. Remen remembers asking her grandfather, but how could they live without food or water? They had God, Neshama. Every morning, God rained down manna from heaven, and the people would eat. By noon, it had evaporated. Each night, they'd find shelter between the wings of God's presence. Day after day, they doubted. And day after day, God was always there. And after 40 years, they finally learned that God could be trusted. And they got to the promised land. Remen remembers asking her grandfather, why this time did God come God's self, Grandpa? Neshama, he said, many people have puzzled over that question and found many different answers. What I think is that the struggle toward freedom is too important for God to leave to others. And the reason this is so is because the only people who can serve God's holy purpose and repair a broken world are the people who become free. Only those who are not enslaved by something else can follow the goodness that is deep inside of them. Years later, Remen had this to say about her grandfather's powerful insight. The slavery that keeps us from following our own goodness is an inner slavery. We are all trapped by ideas of worthlessness, by desire, by envy, or ignorance. We're enslaved by thinking that we're victims or that we're powerless. Passover ultimately is not just about history. Passover is a story about the fear of change, about clinging to places and behaviors that are small and trivial and hurtful. And it's about our refusal to let go of those feelings because they will force us to face something unknown. The words of Rachel Naomi Remen's grandfather resonate across every generation to each of us. The choice is never between slavery and freedom. We must always choose between slavery and the unknown. May each of us face the unknown with courage so that treasuring our freedom, we can become the instruments of redemption that God has created us to be. Amen. I want to invite you to turn with me to page 104, the words of Nishmat Kol Chai. Nishmat Kol Chai, Tivarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Okay. Nehalel bechacha nefaracha nevarech et shem chadshecha ka'amur. LeDavid barchi nafshi et Adonai bechol kravai et shem kadsho. Ha'el b'tatzu mahot uzecha. Hagadol b'fot shemecha. Hagibor l'netzach v'nora v'nohorotecha. HaMelech HaYoshev Al Kisei Ram v'Nisam. Chazan Agar will lead us as we continue now with Shochen Ad, page 105.
Shochen Ad Marom V'kadosh Shemo V'chatuv Renu Tzadikim B'Adonai L'Yisharim Navatila B'fi Sharim Titadal V'Ivrei Tzadikim Titparach U'V'Leshon Chasidim Titromam U'B'Kerem Kedoshim Titkadash ובמקלות רביבות עמך בית ישראל בריני פרשם כמלכנו בכל דור ודור שכן כל היצורים לפניך עד אלוהינו ולאבותינו להודות להלל לשבח לפאר לרומם להדר לברך להלל לקדש על כל דברי שירות משפחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך וישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לכנן. ברכות גדולות מעתה ויד עולם. ברוך הוא אתה אדוני אל המלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודעות אדוני נפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלוקי העולמים. יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ולמד דברי קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי כל ובימי ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגדול ויזמגרי וימרו אמן. שמי רבה ויבורך לעולם עלמי אמן. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרמה ותעשה ותעזר ותעלה ותעגל שמי לקודשה. וכולל מקום כתב שירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן ביעלמה וימרו אמן.
107.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Baruch לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני מבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם, יוצרו ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. הכל יודוך והכל ישבחוך, והכל יראו קדוש כאדוני הכל. המאיר לארץ אדוני מלך, ברחמים טוב, מקדש בכל יום תמיד. כי ערכי בעולם הזה, ואין זאת כמה לגנו, לחיי העולם הבא. אפס בלתי חגור לימות המשיח, ואינו מלך מושיענו לתחיית המתים.
As we're seated, we continue on 108.
אל אדון כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך לפי כל נשמה גודלו וטובו מלא עולם כתוב תבונה סוביב מותו אמן גאה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבות זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יסם בדעת בבינה ובשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל ואלים זיו ומפיקים בנוגה והזיבם מכל העולם שגים בצאתם ושזים מבואם עושים בהם רצון קונם וירא וכבוד נותנים מה לשמו צולה ברינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אור רע והתקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו קוצבם ארון תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש. לילה אשר שבת מכל המעשים ביום השביעי ישב את כיסא כבודו. שבח יקר ותיתן לאל מלך יוצר כל ביום שבת קודש שמך. המאורי אור שעשית יפארו הסלע תתברך צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו בורא קדושים ישתבח שמך מלעד מלכנו יוצר שדים השם. כולם אוהבים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בהמה וברצון קונם, וכולם בודקים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה בשירה ובזמרה ומברכים ומשבחים פרים ארצים מקישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול הגיבור והנורא קדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליכם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליושרה בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ונעימה קדושה, כולם כחלונים, ויאמרים ביראה, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, בכל הארץ כבודו. והאופני והיות הקודש ברעש גדול מנסים למעט שרפים למעטם משבקים ויאמרים ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו ברוך כבוד ייתנו למלך אלוקי וקיים סבירות יאמרו ותשמעו ותשמיעו כי הוא לא פריש בורא רבון אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מרע לאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
We continue now on 111 and we gather our tzitzit together.
אהבתנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ותרחם עלינו, אבין מגן בעבור אבותינו, שבת קודש. והיירנו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחל לבבנו, יבואו יראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא ותחנו נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך ואבינו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו כי בוא ישועת אתה עובד ובקרתה מכל עם ולשון וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע סלע באמת להודות לך ולידך ולייחדך יבוא ברוך אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל ויבוא שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ברוך שם כבודו לעולם ועד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, ושבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך, ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה אם שמעו תשמעו על מצוותיי אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום, ויאהבת את אדוני אלוהיכם. ישמרו לכם. ושמתם את דבריי האלה אדוני לאבותיכם לתת לכם כימי השמיים והארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תזורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריכם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. באמת אנחנו מקווה שלום. דור ודור וקיים ושמו קיים בכיסו נכון, ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת, ודבריו חיים וקיימים, נחמדים נחמדים לעד ולעולמי עולמים, על אבותינו ועלינו. אמת שטחו לנו לאבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו מצילנו ולעם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך.
114.
עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם, מגן ומושיע לבניהם אחריך מאוד. רב ניסה גדול נורא. תהילות היום ברך ומבורך, משה ובני ישראל לקנו שירה, בשמחה רבה, ויאמרו כולם, מי כמוך, האלים אדוני, מי כמוך, נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, נוסף שיבחו גאולים ושמך שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Please rise as we get ready for the Amidah. We'll continue at the bottom of 114. We'll begin the Amidah together. After the Kedusha, please continue yourself till page 120. We're continuing at the bottom of 114, and then we'll skip to 115b.
צור ישראל, הקומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי ימך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני. גאל ישראל.
Amen.
אדוני זבתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, אלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור הנורא, אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר כזה אבות ומביא גואל לבניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור גם אדוני מקיים את אימת הרב ליושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מקלקל קיים בחסד, מקיים עתים ברחמים רבים, סומק נופלים ברופא קולים, ומדיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו בשני עפר, כי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומידו מלך, ולק ממית ומקיים, ומצמיח ישוע, ונאמן אתה לקריות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, וחיי המתים.
קדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, הכתוב הידמיך וקראת אלסה ואמר.
מקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב ידמיך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
אז בכל ואשקלון ובקטק נשים כל מן הצירים הקרבים ובצם ברוך ימירו.
אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, ומתנשאים לאו הצרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ומתנשאים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ברוך אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב ימינו לעולם ועד, תשכון תתקדש ברוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך כדבר אמור בשירי עוזך. אוי דוד משיח צדקך.
מלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה.
ימלוך על העולם מלך ציון לדור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד הגון עליך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך גדול, כי המלך גדול, וקדוש אתה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד הגון עליך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. ישמע משה בן אדם.
Those of you still davening the Amidah, please continue, and the rest of us turn to page 138, Kaddish Shalem.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברה קירותי ונך מלכותי, וקייכון ומכון ופקעי לכל בית ישראל, והגלה וזכרי וימרו, אמן.
Amen.
שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם עולם מהמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויפועל ותרמה ותנשא, ותהדר ותעלה ותעלה שמי לקודשה.
Rikuv.
וכולנו גומרתה ושירתה, תושבקתה ונחמתה, דאמירה ביעלמה וימרו, אמן.
Amen.
הבא שתוכון ובאו תהון, לכל ישראל קודמו בהון, וישמע וימרו, אמן.
Amen.
ושמע וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו, אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. ויאמרו אמן.
We continue with our Torah service, the service for taking out, studying, and hearing Torah, page 139.
כמוך אלוהים אדוני, ואין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני המלך, אדוני המלך, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אברהם היטיב ברצונך את ציון. תיבנה חומות ירושלים, תיבנה חומות ירושלים. כי בכל לבד בדקנו, מלך רם ונישא, אדון עולמים.
Beautiful way to transition into learning and hearing and studying Torah as we transition into this time, this new year of spring. Of course, we know there are 4 new years. This is one of them, spring, new time to contemplate leaving Egypt, leaving our narrow, difficult places. Today, we are fortunate to have Susan Miller read Torah for us and Donna Levin read Haftarah for us. But before that, we're going to begin with the Aliyah on page 613, because how do you not read from page 613? It's too Jewish. You have to read from page 613, Taryag mitzvot, 613 mitzvot. We aspire to doing as many mitzvahs as possible. So please join me now on page 613. But before 613, and you should come in May to the synagogue's gala, where we will feature the boy band 613. And you got a great video from them this week with their shanty singing. But so come and join us and listen to the words of what it means to bring offerings and what it means to set up a sanctuary and what it means then and how it could be meaningful for us today to think about our ancient words and how we bring holiness, how we come to an altar that is not here. There is no altar in Jerusalem. There is only the altars in our hearts. There is only the altars that we build in our lives. So page 613, but first, Lasok B'divrei Torah. Join me in Cantor Ari Priven's melody for it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu Lasok B'divrei Torah, Lasok B'divrei Torah, B'divrei Torah. Amen. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, Tza'av et Aaron v'panav lemor. Zo Torah ta'olah, hi ha'olah al-mokdah. Al hamizbeach halayla ad haboker ve'esh hamizbeach tukad bo, and there shall always be a fire burning on the altar. Lavash hakohen midovad miknesevad yilbash avsaro ve'herim et hadeshen asher tochal ha'esh ha'ta'olah al hamizbeach v'samo eitz al hamizbeach v'pashat begadav v'lavash begadim achirim v'hotzi et hadeshem el michutz lamachaneh el mekom tahor v'ha'esh al hamizbeach tukad bo lo tichbeh, and the fire that's burning on the altar should burn continually. Don't let the light go out. V'yer aleha kohen etzim baboker parach aleha olah v'ktir aleha chalei shlamim eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichveh. A perpetual ongoing fire shall be kept burning on the altar. Do not let that fire go out. Keep those words in mind when we speak Torah a little bit later. We now are honored and privileged to have Susan Miller read for us page 617. So just a few pages later, at the bottom of the page, verse 11. 617, verse 11.
V'zot Torah zevach hashlamim asher yikriv l'Adonai im al todah yikra yakrivenu v'hikriv al zevach todah halach matzot Belulot bashemen urkike matzot meshuchim bashemen v'soled mur beched chalot belulot bashemen al chalot lechem chametz Yakriv Karbano al Zevach Todashlamav Vehikriv Mimenu Echad Mikol Karban Teruma Ladonai Lekohen Hazorek Edam Hashlamim Lo Yeh Uvsar Zavach Todah Shlamav Bayom Karbano Yeachil Lo Yaniach Mimenu Ad Boker.
Amen. And such a beautiful reading. And while you're preparing for Sidarim, for Seder, you're also learning a Torah reading. Incredible Wonder Woman multitasking, doing the ritual and the ritual, both ends of it. So thank you, Susan, for bringing the words of Torah to light. Before we continue with hearing the expansive, beautiful words of this week's Haftarah, let's take a moment to pray for all of our loved ones who are ailing and ill. You may have a loved one in the hospital or someone who is suffering from a mental illness right now, physical ailments. So keep them in mind as Cantor Agar leads us in the Mishavera for those who are ailing.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheverach yimotenu, Mekora bracha lavotenu, Bezozerin of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So beautiful. Thank you. Amen. And may all our prayers be heard, that we can have healing for our family and friends, healing for those who are ailing during this pandemic. So we're going to now turn to such a beautiful Haftarah, page 1295. Later, we're not going there yet. Later tonight, God willing, tonight and tomorrow night, we will sing Eliyahu HaNavi, and we'll invite Eliyahu and Miriam into our Seder, probably the only guests you've had in your house all year. Eliyahu will come masked or all vaccinated up and ready. So at the very end of this Haftarah, we will read that future redemption will come. Future redemption will come from Elijah the prophet. It will be a great time of healing. It will be a time when we are able again to come close to God, when there will be more love and less hatred. So as we sit down at our Pesach Seder, sing for Elijah tonight. Sing for Miriam tonight. Let the time of collective redemption that we bring about. So I'll now ask you to turn to page 1297. 1297, verse 16, for the beautiful words of the prophet Malachi. And now we turn it over to Don.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
I think we said we were starting at verse 11.
Right. At 16. Where are you?
Oh, verse 16, right. It's on page 1297.
I turned the wrong page. I'm really sorry.
1297.
Oh my goodness.
Verse 16.
I had a thing in here. Sorry. Here it is. Az niberu yir'eh Adonai ish ere'ehu vayakshev Adonai vayishma vayikatev sefer zikaron lefanav v'yir'eh Adonai u'lechoshevei shemo v'hayu li amar Adonai tzvaot Layom asher ani oseh segula v'chamalti alehem ka'asher yachmo ish al beno ha'oved oto v'shavtem uritem bein tzadik lerasha bein oved Elohim la'asher lo avado hinei hayom ba'er katanur v'hayu chozedim v'cho'oseh rish'a kash v'lihadotam hayom haba amar Adonai tzvaot asher lo ya'azov lahem shoresh ve'anaf v'zarecha lachem yir'ei shemi shemesh tzedaka u'marpeh bichnafeha Vitzatem ufishtem ke'eglei marpek ve'asotem reshaim ki yiyu efet tachat kapot raglechem vayom asher ani oseh amar Adonai tzvaot zichru Torat Moshe Avdi Asher tziviti oto v'chorev al kol Yisrael chukim u'mishpatim hinei anochi shalach lachem et Eliah hanavi lifnei bo yom Adonai Hagadol v'hanora v'hish השיב לב אבות הבנים, ולב בנים אבותם. פן עבר והכיתי את הארץ חרם. הנה אנוכי שולח לכם את אליה הנביא, לפני בוא יום אדוני הגדול והנורא.
Yashar kochech, beautiful, beautiful. May we all have kavanah to bring Eliyahu Hanavi into the world, into our lives, and Miriam Hanavi'ah. We continue now as we end the Torah service with the beautiful words of Eitz Chaim He, found at the bottom of page 154.
את חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכך מיושר, דרכך דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם.
Yashar koach. We're all going to take a moment to sit down before the Musaf service and hear some Torah. You know, on traditionally, Shabbat Haggadah was the Shabbat where the rabbi could speak as long as he wanted. So now it's he or she. So what do you think, Rabbi GK? A half hour, 45 minutes? Good?
At least an hour.
At least. Good, good. So sit back, get some coffee, hopefully already in a Pesach glass, and we're ready. Well, I want to tell you a story that happened this week. How many of you have been showering just a little less during the pandemic? Okay, you don't have to admit it. Just a lot of people have been showering a little less. Me too. The dermatologists all say it's good. So I went one day to go take a shower this week, and lo and behold, there was no hot water. Yikes. I can't really bring people in my house. I laid down on the floor by the hot water heater with long matches and tried to light the fire that would continually burn to give me hot water for a shower. Match after match, and I couldn't do it. And so I called a friend from Beth Sholom, someone who works there with us, and Emily and her husband came over to my house all masked up, and we schmoozed, and they couldn't get it either at first. And they tried, and then it finally took. And what it took to keep the fire burning is that the coil inside the hot water heater, this is what I learned from them, needed to warm up. It's not enough just to light the light, I was told, but there needed to be some other factors to keep the light lit. First, the coil needs to be ready and warm. There needs to be no draft. It needs to be contained. And only then would I be able to shower. Only then would the fire be continually there. Thank you to Emily's family. There is good fire in this world, and our Torah reading talks about good fire. You heard it when I chanted the Aliyah at the beginning. Eish tamid tukad al hamizbech lo tichveh. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. The pshat, the contextual meaning of this verse, is that we should always have the ability to come close to God. And in ancient times, that meant bringing a korban, a sacrifice. Sian taught us last week that korban means to come close, to bring a korban. And so there always must be a fire ready for our closeness. That might be the pshat, keeping the fire lit, having all of the preconditions so that fire will stay lit, whether that is extra wood in the temple or a working coil in my hot water heater, got to keep that fire lit. But I want to go beyond the pshat, beyond the contextual meaning, and go to the first chief rabbi of Palestine, Rav Kook. In a drash, Rav Kook suggests that the fire alluded to here is a metaphorical flame that burns within each person, a spiritual fire that is lit within the hearts of each Jew. This is the definition of good fire. It is the fire that Moses saw in Exodus when he saw a burning bush that was not consumed. It is a fire that burns continually in the altar, in the temple, or in your heart. The fire in our hearts that inspires us to love one another when we are not feeling loving towards one another. It's the fire that propels us to seek good and to do tikkun. This is the fire that helps us want to reach out and be close to the Holy One. And this is the fire that keeps us fighting for justice. And I hope that during this Pesach season, we will again be renewed to cultivate this passionate fire for God and the Jewish people and humanity. I hope that we can find a lit fire within our neshamas, within our hearts, that the altar that we build will be the altar in our hearts, and that we'll continually light that fire. That is good fire. There's another kind of fire in the Torah, however. It's in our next parsha. That kind of fire is called Eish Zara, strange fire. Aaron's sons Nadav and Avihu will die for bringing strange fire to the altar. Our tradition has a deep debate about what kind of fire this was. What is strange fire? How do you bring a wrong sacrifice? Today, when I read the word strange fire or Eish Zara, I only think of fire that kills innocents, fire that kills children, power that indiscriminately comes from gun violence. This past week, we experienced Eish Zara, strange fire in our country. Not once, but twice. Once in Atlanta, where women of Asian descent were targeted. This was an anti-Asian act, an anti-women act, and an anti-American act of sheer depravity. And then a few days later, we held our breaths, waiting for the death counts from a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. I texted my niece, "Are you okay?" Waiting for the response. Yes, she was, but many others were not. You see, we are in a viral pandemic, but we are also in a gun epidemic. And there is a difference. The word pandemic is used for a disease that is experienced worldwide. Epidemic is used for a disease that affects a large number of people within a certain region. Gun violence is an epidemic, an almost uniquely American disease. New Zealand, Australia, and other places have ameliorated it. Americans are at least as smart as those around the world. You are as smart as those around the world. We in this country came up with vaccines for a pandemic. What can we come up with for an epidemic? Because too many are dead. There was a lull of gun violence during the pandemic, but we are back to facing the societal problem that there is too much gun power on our streets. The problem is complex because it involves multiple competing rights. It involves a right to bear arms as codified in our sacred documents of this country. And it involves a God-given right to live and to not be murdered in daily life. at a supermarket, a school, a concert, just going about your daily business. It does not have to be this way. This is an issue that must cross party lines in our country because other countries have solved their gun violence problem. We just need the courage, the moral courage, and the creativity, and we need to stop posturing. We just need to see life as so sacred that we're willing to change some rights to ensure safety for more. I hesitate to say for all. In the Shulchan Aruch, our Jewish legal code, it clearly states it is a positive commandment to remove and be vigilant about any stumbling block where there is a danger to someone's life. And if you do not remove it or leave the stumbling block and it brings about danger, you have failed in your mission to fulfill the commandment, and you may have been responsible for spilling another's blood. Jewish law and Jewish tradition is clear. We value life more than we value someone's ability to carry an assault weapon. Now, American values here are at a little bit of a difference with Jewish values, but I'm going to say that I think Jewish values may help in that we need to care more about God's children who are created in God's image. Imagine that as the Torah states, we really believed that every person is created in God's image. And imagine what the Talmud teaches, that each life is not only about that life, but that each life represents an entire world. These are the worlds that were extinguished last week because we have not been creative enough or caring enough to get the guns off the street. Hear the names because they are not only statistics. Sun Chung Park, age 74. Hun Jung Grant, age 51. Sun Cha Kim, age 69. Young Yu, age 63. Delania Ashley Yon, age 33. Paul Andre Michels, age 54. Zaijie Tan, age 44. Dayo Feng, age 44. Officer Eric Talley, age 51. Denny Strong, age 20. Tender Young. Nevin Stansasik, age 23. Ricky Olds, age 25. Trelana Bartkowick, age 49. Suzanne Fountain, age 59. Terry Leiker, 51. Ken Mahoney, 61. Lynn Mary, 62. And Jody Waters, 65. Our Orthodox feminist teacher, Blue Greenberg, wrote that after Moses tries to comfort Aaron on the tragic death of Aaron's sons, the Torah responds with two simple words that describe Aaron's action. Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. Aaron responded with a profound, shattering silence, a stunning silence, a shocked silence. A deep human religious response is sometimes to be silent, but not now. A deep religious response is sometimes to pray, but not now. When our people stood at the Red Sea praying to God for an answer, the Midrash says that God responded by saying, "What are you doing praying now? This isn't the time for prayer, this is the time for action." We don't need prayer. We don't need moments of silence, maybe one or two after each tragedy. What we need to respond to this strange fire is a deeply religious response, not silence, not prayer. The deeply religious response of the moral courage and creativity to dialogue with one another, to talk in the communal public square and say, we must solve this because we value the lives of our friends and our family and our children more than we value a gun. The religious response to wanton destruction of human life must be for us to kindle a passionate fire of dialogue and the courage to value life more than the right to a weapon. Our voices and our actions need to say that as religious Jews, we can have a different way of relating to guns from the one that was drafted over 300 years ago. because I think we can all agree there's a problem. Rabbi Shimon ben Bar Yochai was engaged in Torah study when an old person approached him and stood behind a wall and called him and said, "Rabbi, Rabbi, holy light, arise and kindle the lamp." That is the lamp of the holy Shekhinah, of God's indwelling presence within each of us. So we turn today to you, God, and say, Holy One, light our souls with the determination to make our country safer. Imagine a country without this epidemic of gun violence, and then act. Work to make it happen. Work to have a continual fire on the altar that is in your heart, a fire for humanity and safety. That is the religious response. Help us get out of the narrow place of gun violence that we are in this country right now by acting. By calling your officials, elected officials, by crossing aisles, and by thinking about how we, each one of us, can bring about redemption. I hope that you all have a beautiful Pesach that is not marred by violence, but that after Yantif, you go back to your computers and back to your telephones and back to the voice in your heart, that still small voice that is telling each one of us to be passionate and fiery about safety for all. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Yishar Kochet, Rabbi Merow, on those beautiful and prophetic words in response to the Eish Zara of gun violence. We all shamanu, and I hope we will act after Pesach. We're going to invite us now to move towards the conclusion of the service. Those of you who are able to rise, will invite to do so as the Chazan leads us in the Chatzi Kaddish, page 155.
Bielema divra kirute damnik malchute mechayechon uvyomechon uvchayene kol bet Yisrael bagala uvizman kariva vayemeru amen. יש מרבה מבורך, בעולם עולם מעמיה יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפואר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה, ויתעלה, שבט קודש הבריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, זוש ברכתה ונחמתה, למירן דיאלמה וימרו אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, אלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור הנורא, אל העליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, המלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה.
Chazan, you muted yourself accidentally.
Oh, okay. אתה גאולה אדוני מקיים עדים, אתה רב להושיע, משיב ארוך ומוריד הגשם, מקלקל חיים בחסד, מקיים עדים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו איש אלי עפר וכמוך בעל גבורות ומינו מלך מאיתה ומקיים ומצמיח ישוע ונאמר על החיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
נריצך ונקדיש לך ציח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב את מביאך וכרזה אל זה ויאמר.
נריצך ונקדישך כסוד ציח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב על נביאך וכרזה אל זה ואמר
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים זה לזה היה מקום כבודו. לעומתם ברוך יאמרו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו יאמרו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ברוך אדוני ממקומו. ממקומו יפן ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו ערב בבוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביעבה שמע אומרים
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד.
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. הוא אלוהינו אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים.
אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אני אדוני לאלוהיכם ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד לכל הנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ומשיקה קלה לנו שלום ועד כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני הקדוש.
We continue now privately as we conclude the Amidah individually through page 161. For those of you who are still davening, please continue to do so. Those of us who have concluded, the Amidah will turn ahead to page 181 for Kaddish Shalem. Amen.
בעלמא דברי הכירותי ולנקמלכותי בחייכון ובמכון נבחרי לכל בית ישראל הגלה וזכרי ואמרו
Amen.
Merow Mevorach Leolam Ulam Avaya Yitbarach Yitbarach Vishtabach Vitpoar Vitroma Vitase Vitadav Televet Al Hashem Edekudesha
Brecho.
Richulelam Kobikata Vishirata Tushpekata Venekmata Damirami Alamami Meru
Amen.
Itkabato de Konovato Hon de Chol Israel Kodamu Hon de Vishmaya Meru
Amen.
יהי שמריו משמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל במהרו.
Amen.
עושה שלום ממרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל במהרו. אמן.
You're able to rise. Aleinu, page 183.
עלינו לשייך לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך המלכים הקדוש שהוא שמיים ושרץ. אין עוד על כן נקבל לכאן עלינו לראות תפילה. כתוב בתורתך אדוני מלך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
We'd like to ask those who are in the process of mourning or observing Yarsight to remain standing and to unmute yourselves and to join together with me in the Mourner's Kaddish, Kaddish Atom, page 184. Yitgadal Rabbi Yamad Rukei Yamlich Malchutei V'chayechon Yomecha V'chayei B'chol Beit Yisrael Agar Bisman Karim Amen. Yehei Rabbi Morach Amaya Yitbarach Yishtabach V'Pa'er V'Dramam V'Nasei V'Tadar V'Dale Shnei Dekudesha Baruchu Elam Mikol Birchata V'Shirata Tushbechata V'Nechmata Amiran B'Yama V'Mramen Yehei Shlama Rabba Mishmaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Mramen Amen. Oseh Shalom V'Mramav Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Mramen. We ask God who brings peace and comfort on high to bring peace and comfort to those of you remembering your loved ones. I want to thank everyone who helped make the service so beautiful. I want to thank my colleagues, Rabbi Merow, and her beautiful words of Torah, Chazan Agar for leading us in davening. I want to thank Donna for her beautiful, beautiful chanting of the Haftarah. And I want to thank Susan for reading Torah as well this morning. We are all preparing for the start of Pesach, which will begin for most of us. We will begin this evening with our first Seder, and we're all looking forward to that. I hope those of you who are going to be people you love, either virtually or for some of you in person, and that we'll have the ability to experience that joy of leaving Egypt together with people that you love, whether through technology or through the gift of being able to be together. Tomorrow morning, we are going to be inviting those who have RSVP'd to join us in the main sanctuary for the first day morning service, which will take place at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Those who are not coming in person, we invite you to join us on our live stream. And please know that we are looking to be able to both live stream and Zoom, and that hopefully with some technological upgrades can happen within the next month to 6 weeks or so. But In the meantime, live stream will be at 10. By the way, those of you who need to say Kaddish, there'll be a very brief limud and ability to say Kaddish, some study tonight at 6 p.m. if you're saying Kaddish before your first Seder. Then tomorrow evening, Chazan Agar leads the community in a second night communal Seder. We hope many of you have RSVP'd for that and will be joining Cantor Agar. Second day morning services for Pesach, Monday morning will be by Zoom, and that will be at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. Please check your Pesach schedule for all the services throughout this week of Pesach and Chol HaMoed, culminating in our seventh day Shabbat Pesach service a week from today. And Yizkor will be once again in person for those who have RSVP'd in the main sanctuary on Sunday. So 2 opportunities to be together in person. If people, we'd love to see people. We'll of course all be masked and keeping social distant, or not quite yet serving food for schmoozing afterwards in person, but we hope that in the not too distant future, we'll be able to go back to that. We also want to just remind people that there's a beautiful, beautiful Yom Hashoah program that'll be coming up, featuring a profound story about Marcel Groen's uncle of blessed memories, a violin that was kept by a Christian family after Marcel's uncle was murdered in the Shoah. And that will be a Kahila program on April 6th, starting at 7 with a service and 7:30 with a program and playing of that violin. We also want to remind you that the Men's Club is sending us yellow candles this year. We hope that we can all mark Yom HaShoah. The next night is actually Erev Yom HaShoah, Wednesday night. We're doing it on Tuesday night because our kids are in the high school on Tuesdays, and they'll be able to participate in the program by doing it on Tuesday night. So please light those candles and support our Men's Club that makes this possible every year. We have many other things coming up, not the least of which is our Shabbat to honor our beloved Rabbi Merow that is coming up on the Shabbat of April 17. You'll get lots of information coming out about ways that you can be involved in sharing your words to her. And so there's lots that you'll see coming out. I believe the Constant Contact is coming out Tuesday, the first day of Chol HaMoed, to give you all kinds of ways that you can personally express your love and gratitude to Rabbi Merow. That will be coming out on Tuesday of Chol HaMoed. Colleagues, if you have anything you need to add to my announcements, please feel free. If not, we're going to get to Adon Olam on page 187.
This will be to the melody of Oziv Zimratiyah, since this is the song that was sung when the Israelites were led to freedom. Adon Olam asher malach b'derem kol yetzir nivra leitnatsa v'chefzo l'gol azay melech shemo nikra v'yatare kilot hakol levado imloch nora והוא אחד ואין שני והמשילו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא עוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גולי וצור כבלי בעת צרה והוא ניסי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו אפקיד רוחי ועת תישן ויעירה ואם רוחי גביעתי אדוני לי ולא יירא. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Beautiful, beautiful service.
Shabbat
Thank you.
Shalom. We want to invite people who have some grape juice or wine. We're going to do kiddush together. If you have some egg matzah, maybe you want to do hamotzi matzah
Shalom.
before you have the real matzah a little bit later this evening. Anyone? Well, please feel free to join with me in kiddush. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lahasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam b'rit olam beini uvein b'nei Yisrael ohoti le'olam beini uvein b'nei Yisrael ohoti le'olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz uhu hayom ha'ashvi'i Shabbat vayinacha al kim berach Adonai Yom HaShabbat v'yikadshehu savri
L'chaim.
Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri hagafem L'chaim.
L'chaim.
All right, anyone got some? Anyone have any egg matzah? All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu